Oh, because I never pressed that got it button, so I think it didn't. All right, we are live. Okay, continuing the study of Srimad Bhagavatam. We are in chapter 7, Pandavas and Krishna. You can start again from here as he continued to meditate.
As he continued to meditate, he realized they were hearing narrations of Krishna's pastimes and glories, the Srimad Bhagavatam. He saw how by listening to the sacred text, the materially conditioned soul's love for Krishna blossomed. They became enthusiastic to exclusively serve him, thus attracting his protection. Of course, that was Narada's point. Simply by hearing Srimad Bhagavatam, an attraction for the Lord's loving service sprouts up in the heart, extinguishing the fire of lamentation, illusion, and fearfulness. Vasudeva fell to the ground, overwhelmed with ecstasy. The Lord was so great and merciful that one only had to hear about him to become free of ignorance and pain. He shed profuse tears of joy. Gradually he calmed himself and immediately began to write the Srimad Bhagavatam. Sutta concluded his description. When the divine literature was completed, Vasudeva taught it to his son Shukadeva. How was that possible? Shaunaka asked. I have heard that Shukadeva, who was self-realized from birth, left home before even receiving the customary rites of passage.
Somebody else likes to take over the reading, please. Thank you, Les Manjari.
You're welcome.
Sutta replied, "You have heard correctly, my dear friend." Sukadeva went to a solitary place to meditate on the impersonal Brahman. However, when Vyasadeva completed his work, he instructed two of his disciples to go to his son and recite several verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Upon hearing these verses, Sukadeva's heart became attracted to Krishna, and he returned to his father's ashram to receive further instructions from him. Shaunaka remained doubtful. What need is there for a fully self-realized soul who is already detached from family connection to learn the Srimad Bhagavatam? One second, Gaurav. A broad smile lit up Sutta's face. My dear friends, he said, not only can the beautiful narrations of Krishna's pastime liberate suffering souls, but they also appeal to liberated souls. Although such elevated personalities have no interest in fleeting sensual pleasure, they take great delight in hearing these transcendental discourses. Thus, even though Sukadeva was immersed in the Brahman meditation, when he overheard the devotees reciting the Bhagavatam, his heart was profoundly attracted to Krishna, and he desired to hear more. Pray tell us the verses which enchanted Sukadeva's mind. Sutta replied, the first spoken to Yudhishthira by Bhishma was, O king, that person whom, out of ignorance only, you thought to be your maternal cousin, your very dear friend, well-wisher, counselor, messenger, and benefactor, is the personality of Godhead Krishna. The next verse was spoken by the great devotee Uddhava. Alas, how shall I take shelter of one more merciful than he who granted the position of mother to the she-demon Putana, although she was faithless and smeared her breast with deadly poison for the Lord to suck. Sutta recited another verse, and when he had finished, many of the sages sat stunned in ecstasy. Others wept, and still others laughed ecstatically. Shaunaka's limbs trembled, and his bodily hair stood erect. Gradually, he composed himself and said, "My mind is bewildered. I had other questions, but I can hardly remember them. All I want now is to hear more about Krishna." Sutta, who was also feeling overwhelmed with spiritual emotion, encouraged his friend. "Let us not leave any room for doubts. Take a moment to remember your questions." Shaunaka straightened himself and breathed deeply. Gradually, his memory returned. "You told us that Sukadeva recited the Srimad Bhagavatam to Parikshit when the emperor was fasting to death by the banks of the Ganges." "Yes," replied Sutta. "What is the confusion?" Shaunaka answered. "I have heard that Sukadeva walked about naked, pretending to be dumb and senseless to that materialistic people who would not speak to him. Indeed, I've also heard that he was generally considered to be mad." Laughing, he related an incident he had heard demonstrating Sukadeva's aloofness from material existence. Once Sukadeva, naked as usual, wandered near a lake where a group of celestial damsels were bathing. These ladies had not been disturbed to see him, as he made no distinction between male and female. When Vyasadeva, following his son, passed by them, the same ladies quickly covered themselves. This was because, unlike Sukadeva, it was apparent Vyasadeva recognized the difference between male and female. Unfortunately, most people interpret Sukadeva's attachment to be the sign of insanity. So how did Parikshit recognize him to be a self-realized soul and agree to hear from him? Sutta said, "Ah, wonderful question. I will explain. Do you have any other doubts?" Shaunaka replied, "It also amazes me that Sukadeva agreed to instruct Emperor Parikshit for 7 days and nights. I have been told that normally he never associated with materialists for longer than it took to receive a cup of milk. Even that brief connection was simply in order to benefit the giver. Actually, he did not." You want me to continue? Or if somebody wants.
Yeah, next, if can we have another volunteer? Thank you, Tarani Radha. We can start from here. Actually, he did not. Actually, he did not need their charity as he depended fully on Krishna. So how is it that he sat for 1 week with the world emperor? Sutta said, "Another excellent question. Do you have any further queries?" Shaunaka continued, "I'm also intrigued as to why Emperor Parikshit gave up his kingdom to fast to death. So many citizens depended on his leadership and protection. As a great devotee, surely he had a sense of responsibility for everyone's welfare. Even other kings looked to him for guidance and protection. He was not materially attached and performed his kingly duties in the spirit of pure devotional service to Krishna. So why did he give up his God-given duty and fast to death?" Shaunaka stopped and sat back. He shook his head slightly. "Am I wasting our time with these questions? Maybe you should just tell us about Krishna. After hearing those sublime verses, I think we only want to hear his glories." Some sages in the assembly called out in agreement, "Yes, please tell us about Krishna's pastimes." Others, however, disagreed. "We also had these doubts," that Shaunaka expressed. "Please, first dispel them for us." Sutta held up his hands to quieten the audience. "My friends, be peaceful. I shall speak about Krishna's pastimes while simultaneously answering your questions. You need first to understand about Parikshit's exalted birth and heritage. He was the posthumous son of Abhimanyu, the son of Arjuna and Subhadra. Thus, the emperor was Krishna's grandnephew." Shaunaka expressed surprise. Parikshit was directly related to Krishna? Somebody likes to take over from here?
Yes, Mataji, I can read. Suta nodded, certainly. Shaunaka's face lit up. I think I understand how he was able to recognize Sukadeva and why that esteemed sage spent so much time with him. As Krishna's relation, Parikrit must have been a great saint himself. Yes, you have understood my point. He was a pure devotee from his very birth. Indeed, he saw the Lord in the womb when the Kaurava warrior Ashwathama tried to kill him with the Brahmastra missile. Shaunaka frowned. Why did Ashwathama hurl that most deadly weapon at an unborn child? And how is it Parikrit did not die at that time? I'll explain, replied Suta. Let us pick up the story from the first day after the Pandavas defeated Duryodhana in the battle of Kurukshetra. Yudhishthira sat amid his brothers along with Draupadi and Krishna. They had just spent their victory night in Duryodhana's deserted tent. Finally, the nightmare of their persecution at the Kuru's hand was over. You have a long day ahead of you, Emperor, said Krishna. After breakfast, you should return to your old camp and meet with your generals. As they broke their fast, a commotion arose outside. They heard the shrill voice of a high man demanding to see the emperor and the grooved tones of guard forbidding him, followed by the sound of a scuffle. Concerned, Yudhishthira asked for the distressed men to be brought before him. Soon a disheveled and shaking man entered, flanked by two armed guards. Seeing Yudhishthira, he fell flat to the ground, saying, My lord, he cried, they're all dead. Who? Asked Yudhishthira. And who are you, my good sir? The man remained whipping on the floor, repeatedly muttering, They are all dead. Intrigued, Bhima rose from his seat and helped the trembling newcomer to his feet. Examining him closely, he exclaimed, Apt. The man touched Bhima's feet and whispered, Yes, Lord, it is I. Bhima turned to Yudhishthira and said, He's a cook in your army, brother. Greeted warmly by the Pandavas and Krishna, Apt was encouraged to speak. He told them how the previous night the head cook has ordered him to go to the river to collect water for breakfast. When he returned, he saw the camp ablaze and he could hear man screaming. He hurried towards the entrance where he saw Kripacharya in full armor, holding a drawn sword and guarding the gate. As he approached him, some panicked soldier rushed out of the camp. To apt horror, Kripacharya mercilessly cut down this unarmed and frightened man. Terrified, Apt then hid in the bushes. Around an hour later, Ashwathama emerged, covered in the blood, holding his sword aloft in one hand and in the other a large sack from which blood dripped endlessly. Laughing like a madman, he asked Kripacharya, Did any escape? A few tried, but I killed them just as you ordered, General. Apt continued, When the two had left, I entered our camp, going.
Thank you. Somebody else likes to read? Thank you.
From tent to tent, I saw that everyone had been slain. My sons, my brothers, cried Draupadi, jumping up from her seat in extreme agitation. At looked down and made no reply. As the Pandavas stared at him in horror, Draupadi swooned. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Duryodhana lay with his leg awkwardly trapped under his thigh, his drawn sword on the bare earth by his side. As the sun brightened the horizon, the snarling jackals surrounding him backed off. Exhausted from his efforts to keep them at bay, he tried to lie back but could not because of his leg's awkward position. Gently he attempted to ease his limb down, but unbearable pain seared through his body and made him cry out in anguish. Strenuously keeping himself propped up with his elbows, he looked down at his bloodied thigh. He cursed Bhima. How could that evil-minded Pandava have struck him below the waist? Duryodhana's breath came rapidly. He did not have the strength to keep himself up for much longer. Gritting his teeth, he made one more Herculean effort to dislodge his foot and straighten his leg. The pain was so severe he lost consciousness. Slowly coming round, he heard a low voice say, "Curses on those loathsome Pandavas! Look what they have done to the king." A heavy hand stroked Duryodhana's brow, and he felt cool water on his lips. Slowly opening his eyes, he saw a blur which gradually formed into Ashwatthama's face. "Thank God, you still live," Ashwatthama cried out. Duryodhana closed his eyes. Hot tears streamed down his face. "My friend," he rasped, "all is lost. I cannot survive much longer. Flee while you can." Ashwatthama spoke heatedly. "My lord, I have wreaked revenge on your enemies. I single-handedly killed the Pandavas and their entire army." Duryodhana again opened his eyes with difficulty, straining against the pain that racked his whole body. "The Pandavas are dead?" he exclaimed. He looked doubtfully at his general. How could Ashwatthama alone have accomplished what he, with all his royal resources, had not been able to achieve throughout his entire life? "I cannot believe you," he cried. "I have proof," Ashwatthama declared. "See what I have brought." Ashwatthama picked up the bloodied sack which lay on the ground next to him and tripped out its macabre contents. 5 severed heads rolled onto the ground, their sightless eyes staring out of their pallid faces. "I killed them while they slept," said Ashwatthama with a harsh laugh. Duryodhana strained to recognize the 5 faces of his enemies. "Let me touch them. I'll be able to tell their features with my hands." Ashwatthama placed the decapitated head of Bhima's son in Duryodhana's hands. "Behold the head of your nemesis Bhima." Duryodhana eagerly ran his fingers over the nose, eyes, and mouth. Yes, this was Bhima. He was finally slain. Duryodhana thanked Providence he had lived long enough to see the death of his own enemy. "I congratulate you on your chivalry, General Ashwatthama." As Ashwatthama smiled proudly, Duryodhana curled his fingers around the skull and squeezed it, imagining he was personally destroying Bhima. To his surprise and dismay, it caved in under a little pressure. "This cannot be Bhima's skull. His entire body is like iron." Turning disappointedly toward Ashwatthama, he demanded, "Tell me the truth. Who was this man?" Ashwatthama sighed. "Very well. It is not Bhima but his son, Sutasoma. These other 4 are Draupadi's other sons." "Why did you lie to me?" "The son is considered the same as the father, so I did not exactly lie," protested Ashwatthama. "You heinous fool!" exclaimed Duryodhana. Shrinking back in the shame, Ashwatthama said, "I just wanted to make you happy before you left." Duryodhana's head fell back to the ground in despair, and he snarled, "How could you think this vile act would please me? I had no quarrel with these boys. They were the last surviving males in our dynasty. How will the Kurus survive now?" Grimacing with pain, Duryodhana turned his head away from Ashwatthama. "Leave me. I do not want to see your face." Ashwatthama stood up, his face a mask of dismay. Looking around fearfully, he stumbled back towards his horse. If Duryodhana was so disgusted with him, he dared not imagine what the Pandavas were thinking. He needed to flee before they found him. In Duryodhana's royal tent, the 5 Pandavas and Krishna gently tried to revive Draupadi. Picking her up in his arms, Bhima placed her on a couch. They wiped her forehead with a damp cloth. When she opened her eyes, she again remembered the frightful news and cried piteously, "Oh, my sons, my sons."
Shall I read?
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody else, please take over. Thank you.
His grief and fury rising, Arjuna picked up his bow, known as a Gandiva, and addressed his inconsolable wife. Gentle lady, when I present you with that wretched Brahmin's head, after beheading him with arrows from my Gandiva bow, I shall wipe the tears from your eyes and pacify you. Then, after burning your sons' bodies, you can take your ritual bath standing on his head. Touching Yudhishthira's feet, he requested, "Grant me permission to depart, dear brother." Yudhishthira nodded. "Go, but be cautious, Arjuna. Ashwatthama has lost all sense of morality. He is unpredictable and dangerous." Krishna stepped forward and also touched Yudhishthira's feet. "Please allow me to accompany my friend." Yudhishthira smiled and gave his assent. He looked lovingly at Krishna. Who could understand him? The whole world moves under his command, and yet he humbly asks permission from his servant. The two friends hurried to Arjuna's chariot. Krishna climbed into the driving seat and took the reins. Clutching his bow, Arjuna jumped up behind Krishna. He held onto the chariot's pole at Krishna as Krishna urged the horses on, and they sped away in clouds of dust. Some distance ahead of them, Ashwatthama repeatedly whipped his fatigued horse, frequently glancing over his shoulder. Seeing the dust in the distance raised by Arjuna's chariot, he became even more frantic. It could only be the vengeful Pandavas pursuing him. They would surely show him no mercy. Like a madman, Ashwatthama struck his horse relentlessly without warning. His animal collapsed in exhaustion, pitching him headlong onto the.
Okay. Thank you, Rajshri. So
Thank
we
you,
end the
Madhuri.
reading for today. And let's take a moment. This is a very intense chapter where we are seeing Draupadi grieve, where we see that Pandavas have been cheated, betrayed, and the Upa Pandavas have been slaughtered mercilessly. And we can actually see all these things happening in presence, in physical presence of the Supreme Lord, Krishna, on the side of the Pandavas. So take a deep breath. Sit in a comfortable position. You can close your eyes if that helps your meditation. And look at this opportunity of learning from the Pandavas, of understanding why Pandavas were so dear to Krishna, why Pandavas are known as the victorious heroes of our earth, of our country. As this history was being written, and as Pandavas went through austerities, onslaught of abuse, atrocities, injustice by the Kauravas, year after year, beginning from their childhood days, the Pandavas kept growing stronger in their faith, in their skill, in their ability to lead the world. Every abuse, every onslaught, every insult, every injustice Pandavas took it as an opportunity for growth. In front of Pandavas' life situations, where Bhima was tried to be poisoned and put into a river to die, or the Pandavas were set up to go and live in a lac house, and Duryodhana tried to burn them all down alive. So many devious ways that Duryodhana tried to destroy the Pandavas out of his envy, out of his jealousy, out of his insecurity. Yet, the Pandavas' faith in Krishna kept growing, and Krishna kept helping them in every opportunity. And in this chapter, we see that right after the war, where Duryodhana was crying in pain and agony and experiencing the consequences of all his bad actions, as his limb was broken, his thigh was breaking, and blood was oozing out of his body, and his almost lifeless body was lying down there all alone with no body. The heinous act of Ashwatthama, of killing all the Upapandavas, is definitely not a situation we would compare with our own adversities in life. Yet the feeling of disappointment, the feeling of misery, the feeling of disgust with people around us who do not treat us nicely, who do not protect us, who do not respect us, can hurt our soul, can hurt our heart, and make us feel very weak. So let us think about the adversities in our life and try to understand that just as the Pandavas had Krishna on their side, we have Krishna on our side too. And let us derive the strength that comes from faith. Let us derive that strength that comes from the love of the Lord, which is unconditional. That unconditional love is what we are all looking for, running around on this face of earth, trying to find that acceptance in every relationship, in every chapter of our life. Yet we do not turn towards the one who is giving us that supply of acceptance, Supreme Lord Sri Krishna. So let us direct our thoughts, our focus on the Lord, even though we might not understand why we have adversities and difficulties in our life, but take this as an opportunity to understand Krishna's plan in our life and hand over our difficulties in the care of the Lord and beg Him to give us the strength to do His will. May Krishna's will and not ours be done. So with this thought in our minds, what kind of a prayer or affirmation comes to your mind? You can share that in the presence of the devotees here. You can carry that in the rest of your day, the next 24 hours. This can be your meditation. What is your prayer? What is your affirmation that you would like to set? Go ahead, unmute yourself, and you can just state it.
I will go with mine. Hare Krishna. There are things which triggers me, and sometimes I act in the way which I am not supposed to. Like I get angry, I get sad. So throughout the day today, whenever I will get those triggering points, I will immediately hand it over to the Lord. And let Lord take the control of that situation, keeping me at peace and cool. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So adversities are way of this world. So when I go through adversities and unexpected, which my mind cannot handle or which my body cannot handle, like how Draupadi was going through, I want to I want to pray to Krishna to, or like, I want to hand over that fear that I feel in during those moments. I want to hand over those fears to Krishna, and with the faith that he, like that Parikshit Maharaj was like helpless in the womb of Uttara, and Krishna protected him because he was devotee of Krishna. So with the faith that whatever devotional practice I'm doing now, that Krishna will be there for me. Yeah, Hare Krishna.
My affirmation for today is that no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what people around say, I want to put a boundary around my time with Krishna, and I want to perform my duties as an act of love and gratitude to my Divine Father, and I request Him to give me the strength to do His will regardless of the circumstances. I don't want to give in to the circumstances. I want to place the Lord as my priority and my time with the Lord as a precious moment of intimacy and connection. Thank you. And for those of you who are not in a private place, you can always type it in the chat box and we can read it on your behalf. But this is a very powerful exercise to set your intention for the next 24 hours so that you feel empowered with this message of Srimad Bhagavatam and this energy that you've just derived. So maximize this, take it with you, own it.
I also desire that I want to affirm. I also desire that no matter what small adversities or big adversities I go through, I keep coming back to the next right thing, like Arjuna, how he did. Like he didn't lament or he didn't become weak. He just took the next right thing decision and then he acted on it. And Krishna accompanied him. So yeah, I'm thinking that that next right thing is in alliance with Krishna's will, that it will please Krishna's will. Hare Krishna.